Japan is the land of engineering marvels. The skyscrapers are built to withstand powerful earthquakes, and the trains are almost always on time. Tokyo Skytree, the Akashi Kaikyo Bridge, and the Tokaido Shinkansen were all built without a hitch. However, not every engineering project in the land of the rising sun goes according to plan. The $20 billion Kansai International Airport might be one of the biggest engineering disasters Japan has ever seen. The airport is sinking into the Osaka Bay, and $12 billion has been spent trying to save it. Here's a look at why the airport's sinking and what's being done to solve the problem. The funny thing about the Kansai International Airport is that it's actually supposed to be sinking. It's just sinking a lot faster than engineers anticipated. One question remains: will the airport settle high enough above sea level to avoid major flooding? Only time will tell, and so far, only stopgap solutions are being used to keep Kansai International Airport floating in Osaka Bay. Before we take a deep dive into these measures, let's take a look at how the Kansai International Airport was built. Construction of the Kansai International Airport began way back in 1987. The project was originally supposed to cost about $8 billion. However, the total cost to build the airport has since skyrocketed to $20 billion because of all the costly repairs. Ironically, Japan's Ministry of Transportation chose to build the airport in Osaka Bay because building the airport inland would have cost too much. The ministry wasn't willing to pay for the added expense of relocating and compensating residents who would have to move to make space for a new airport. Moving factories and businesses would also have come at a hefty price. Then there would have been the environmental concerns. If only they had the hindsight to see how much more costly a sinking airport would be. Before the airport's first terminal and runway could be built, construction workers had to build an artificial island. Land reclamation picked up significant steam in Japan following the Second World War, so it's not like building land on top of the water was exactly a new concept. First, construction crews laid down sand on top of the clay seabed. The next step involved installing 2.2 million vertical pipes, each with a diameter of 16 inches. Once the pipes were pounded into the seabed, they were filled with moisture-absorbing sand. This was an essential step because reclaimed land is essentially a wet sponge. If the pipes didn't absorb water from the surrounding soil and seabed, construction would be impossible. To support the weight of an airport terminal, a dense and dry foundation is necessary. With the pipes removed and the sand drain method implemented, crews could begin adding rock and soil to the sand layer. The rock and soil were hauled in from nearby mountain ranges. In total, 180 million cubic meters of rock and soil were added to the sand layer. To protect the foundation, a seawall made of 48,000 specially designed concrete tetrapods was built around the island. The perimeter of the seawall was built using 69 large steel chambers. The tetrapods were then placed in between these chambers. The seawall was designed to protect the airport from waves and surges by dissipating the oncoming water. Without the seawall, the airport would be inundated with water from Osaka Bay. More soil was added until the island reached a height of 65 feet above sea level. Unfortunately, engineers should have built the island even higher because they seriously underestimated how much the 511-hectare island would sink. Once the island was stabilized, construction crews began working on the terminal and runway. In 1990, a 3-kilometer bridge connecting the island to the commercial development of Rinku Town was built. The bridge connecting the airport to Osaka was not cheap. It cost about $1 billion to build. The first terminal opened in 1994, but financial problems quickly arose. The airport was deeply in debt after construction was completed on the first terminal and runway. Annual interest payments were as high as $560 million in the first few years of operation. The main terminal building of Kansai International Airport was designed by famed Italian architect Renzo Piano. He was chosen to work on the project because of his unique vision, but his plan almost didn't come to fruition. Government officials wanted to make the terminal shorter than originally planned to save money, but Piano insisted the terminal be built to the intended specifications. The 1.7-kilometer terminal is actually the longest in the world, but it might look quite different today if Piano had to change his plans last minute. Despite the first island sinking far more than anticipated, engineers believed they had the situation under control, so construction began on a second terminal and runway in 2003. A second island was built using the same process as the first, but this time engineers adjusted their measurements as they knew this island would sink just as much as the first. Officials deemed the expansion necessary as tourism in Japan was increasing exponentially. Narita Airport and Haneda Airport in Tokyo were also extremely congested, and the Ministry of Transportation wanted to make Kansai International Airport a gateway to Asia. They didn't want to lose customers to the airports in Hong Kong and South Korea. So, why is the airport sinking in the first place? Well, the sinking was inevitable, but engineers severely underestimated how fast and deep the airport's island would sink. Kansai International Airport has already sunk 38 feet since it opened. When construction began, engineers estimated the first island would sink 19 to 25 feet. They used the low end of their estimates and ended up paying the price. Engineers expected the islands to evenly settle over 50 years and stabilize at 13 feet above sea level, which is the minimum elevation required to prevent serious flooding. By the year 2000, parts of Kansai's airport's first island had already sunk to just 13 feet above sea level, far sooner than engineers expected. Engineers have since adjusted their calculations and now predict the airport will sink 13 more feet and reach sea level by 2056. So far, more than $150 million has been spent to strengthen and raise the seawall around the airport to prevent this from happening. Raising the seawall isn't the only solution engineers have come up with to stop Kansai International Airport from sinking. Unfortunately, all the other solutions are also temporary measures. 1999 was the year that things really started to fall apart. The first island had already sunk 27 feet instead of the estimated 19 feet, so engineers got to work to slow things down. They excavated the ground below the passenger terminal and inserted a series of iron plates directly below the hydraulic jacks and 900-column foundation. The columns of the foundation were then raised in stages. This slowed the sinking considerably, but it came at an exorbitant cost. The price to build the Kansai International Airport had already ballooned to $15 billion, making it the most expensive civic work project in history. Kansai International Airport isn't going to sink into Osaka Bay anytime soon, but the sinking is far from over. The hydraulic jacks underneath the airport need to be adjusted every 2 years, and there are now meters installed on the columns to measure how much the airport is tilting. If the corrective measures don't hold and the airport starts to sink faster, it will have to be abandoned and a new international airport built in the Kansai region. Climate change might be an even bigger threat to the airport. In 2018, the airport was hit by Typhoon Jebi. The typhoon was so severe that the airport had to pause operations after seawater surges inundated the island. Runways were flooded and water reached up to the engines of some of the planes. Here's a fun fact. Did you know that Japan has a rail line that's actually supposed to be underwater? The Hokkaido Shinkansen, which cost $4.67 billion to build, connects Japan's two largest islands, Honshu and Hokkaido. The bullet train passes through the $7 billion Seikan Tunnel, which travels under the Tsugaru Strait. That's it, folks. Thanks for watching. Stay tuned to this channel for more great videos.